Marine Corps, I graduated high school in 2002, and college was really out of the picture for me. My parents hadn't gone to college, and education really wasn't valued in my household. So I floated through life for almost a year after high school until finally one day I picked up a newspaper and read the headline, Marines Invade Iraq. And there was a sense of duty, a sense of pride for me that I knew what I had to do. So I didn't think much into it, and a few months later I was standing on the yellow footprints in San Diego, California at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot, and I headed off to the School of Infantry, followed by Light Armored Vehicle School, and then immediately after, that's when we deployed to Iraq for the first time. So I'll bring you back to where I was at in my story. And the first 2 months in my second deployment in Iraq were very slow. We lived in the desert. We occupied a traffic control point just outside of this small town called Anna. Now our living quarters for our platoon of 30 plus Marines consisted of 10 feet tall, 6 feet wide barriers filled with dirt. Now these were walls for our 20 foot by 20 foot compound. We slept on cots. We had dirt floors. We didn't take showers because we didn't have running water. And our bathroom, the best part, our bathroom consisted of an old lawn chair we had with a toilet seat screwed onto it. We were pretty much in paradise. Now in November we moved into the small town of Anna, and our mission was to provide a 24/7 military presence to help drive out the insurgents that had embedded into the population. And in the first 30 days of being in that town, 1/3 of our company, approximately 40 Marines, including myself, were wounded, mainly from IEDs targeted towards our foot patrols. Fast forward to Christmas Eve 2006, I was just about to return back to full duty after suffering a traumatic brain injury from an IED, an improvised explosive device that had exploded in the center of our foot patrol, sending half of my squad home. I was standing guard on the headquarters tower overlooking a mosque about 75 yards away while my partner kept an eye on the back of the building. And suddenly my eyes were drawn to a blast just in front of the mosque, and instantly I knew what this black smoke trail was. It was a rocket-propelled grenade flying straight towards us. And our tower was constructed out of plywood, and on the outside of that wood there were 2 layers of sandbags stacked about chest high, and above chest high we didn't have any protection. And this RPG was flying straight towards our head. So I froze like a deer in the headlights. My mind was telling me to take cover, but my body felt paralyzed. I couldn't react, and just as this RPG was about to fly into the tower and kill us both, it curved downward and hit the rooftop about 5 feet away. Now, after the RPG exploded, it sent a shockwave through our bodies, and as I fell to the ground, my helmet fell off my head because I had it unstrapped. I had grown complacent over the months. We started taking small arms fire from an AK-47 coming from the same direction as the mosque, and the rounds were flying into the tower and had us pinned down, and my hearing was gone, but I knew I had to return fire. So as those rounds continued to fly into the tower, I reached up, I cocked the machine gun and took a deep breath, popped up and started to engage the enemy. I was able to suppress the enemy fire until the remaining Marines were able to get into position around the compound and suppress the enemy fire as well. And in the end, we put about 3,000 rounds downrange in a matter of 2 or 3 minutes. So we Marines get a little too excited. And as you can imagine, after that day, we didn't have another attack on our compound. Now, combat continued for another 3 months until we were finally replaced by another Marine unit. And our next mission was to patrol the outskirts of town, similar to what we did in the first part of the deployment. And days were much calmer than the combat we had faced in Anna. Now, 1 month before we were due to return home to the States, tragedy struck. One of our fellow Marines was killed by an IED blast. and our whole company was devastated. And the very next day, my crew was almost killed when our vehicle stopped just 2 inches short of a pressure plate IED that was loaded with 45 pounds of rocket propellant. You see, we were only 30 days from leaving Iraq, and many of us, including myself, were only 60 days from leaving the Marines. Depression set in hard for us all. And in the end of our deployment, I conducted more than 300 combat patrols. And in April of 2007, we returned home to the States, and I immediately began my checkout process to complete my 4 years of service. And in May, I returned home to Missouri. And as you can imagine, transitioning back to the civilian sector after all I had experienced over the last 4 years was a challenge. I'd often wake up at night and still think I was in a combat zone. I'd hear certain sounds, smell certain smells, and it would trigger my memory. And seeing people take their freedoms for granted really bothered me. And I was on a constant guard and had a short fuse that often made me lose my temper. Now on the flip side, I was thrilled to be alive and back home. I partied every night of the week, spent every dollar I had, which wasn't much, by the way. And I was on a downward spiral, and I needed something to get me out of it. So in August of 2007, I enrolled in college. My first class, political affairs. I'm sure you can imagine how that went for me. You see, college was a complete culture shock. I was a 24-year-old combat vet sitting in class with a bunch of 18-year-old kids who most still lived at home with mom and dad and had no idea there was even a war going on. And I had a rough time for the next couple of years until finally I got my head on straight, made numerous positive changes in my life. And the first blessing that happened to me was meeting my beautiful now wife, Lindsay, sitting down in the front row there. Thank you. She inspired me, she encouraged me, she pushed me to eliminate excuses in my life and also to continue my education, which has ultimately led to a bachelor's degree and 2 master's degrees, which makes me laugh today because I was that kid that barely made it through high school.